The Iran war has caused the worst energy crisis in history, according to the International Energy Agency. It's been politically unpopular in the US too, ahead of crucial midterm elections in November. So, even if it finally ends, could this war have long-lasting implications? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. They predicted a quick victory and a toppling of the political establishment in Iran, but the rationale for the US and Israel's war has not materialised. Iran's retaliation attacking Gulf states has caused what's being viewed as the worst energy crisis in history. The effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz has cut off nearly a fifth of the world's oil and gas supplies, but there have been other far-reaching effects on the military and diplomatic fronts. The protection provided by a US military presence in the Gulf is now being questioned when wars launched by the US without consultation can make that region a target. American relations with European allies are under more strain, with none willing to answer Trump's call to arms. A war politically unpopular in the US is also leading to more questioning of the alliance with Israel by those paying higher prices. So could this war have a lasting legacy with global implications? We'll put that to our panel of guests when they join us in a moment. But first, this report from Alexandra Byers.
The moment the US and Israel launched their missiles at Iran on February 28th, they changed the world for years to come. After nearly 5 weeks of all-out war and 6 weeks of a ceasefire and shipping blockade, the fallout from this conflict has been profound. But economists and central banks warn the full impact is still to come. The disruption in the Strait of Hormuz has already triggered global fuel shortages and sent prices soaring. The Gulf, the epicenter, is in economic shock. The World Bank has slashed its growth forecast for the region from 4% to just 1.3% and warned there could be long-term consequences. At least 80 energy sites have been hit by retaliatory Iranian strikes. Repairing that damage will take years at huge cost, but wider economic damage will be felt globally from the loss of production squeezing energy supplies. The world's lost nearly a fifth of its liquefied natural gas supply from Qatar's damaged Ras Laffan complex, with the impact felt worldwide. Take Asia, for example. Petrol and gas prices have shot to record highs in Pakistan. The Philippines has declared a state of national emergency. Queues and panic buying in Sri Lanka and Nepal. Manufacturers in China quickly reported plastic shortages. Jet fuel prices are up 80%. And beyond oil and gas, crucial products like helium, sulfur, and tungsten, which are used to make semiconductors, fertilizer, and weapons, are also caught up in the blockade of the strait. The price of fertilizer is already up 30%, just as many countries are about to enter planting season. And that's expected to be felt in food costs around the world later this year. All told, the damage to global transport and supply chains has been so severe, the International Monetary Fund has predicted that in the very worst case, global growth could slow to 2% this year, something it says has only happened 4 times since 1980. Alexandra Byers, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
So on Inside Story, we're going inside the war that has dominated global events for the last nearly 3 months. Joining us, our guest today in Tehran, Foad Izadi, political analyst and associate professor at the University of Tehran. Today in the Albanian capital, Tirana, Ambassador Christopher Hill, a former US diplomat who served as the ambassador to Iraq and negotiator during talks with North Korea. And in Kuwait City, Abdullah al-Shayji, he's Professor of Political Science at Kuwait University. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. Let me start with you, Ambassador Christopher Hill, and go back to the beginning of the war, the 28th of February. From all we read now, this was supposed to be a very quick operation. That is not how it's turned out.
You're absolutely correct. I think when the history books are written, there are very few wars in which one side has gone in with the wrong assumptions more than this conflict. First of all, there was a sense from a year ago that Iran was in an extremely weakened position, that its proxies, as they're called, were also very weakened, that namely Hezbollah, and that somehow this was a good time to make it clear to Iran that they are never going to have a nuclear program. Well, I think there was a complete misunderstanding of how Iranians think. Now, whether this is a function of the fact that we have not had an American diplomat in Iran since 1979, or even American business people since 1979, I think there was a complete lack of understanding of Iran's motivation and what they would try to do. Secondly, I think there was a real misunderstanding.
Ambassador, sorry to interrupt. Do you think, in a way, that President Trump was seduced by military success a year ago, attacking Iran, and then at the beginning of this year, what happened in Venezuela, that he felt perhaps the same thing could happen, remove the leader and everything else would fall into place?
Yeah, I will not argue with you on that. I think the lesson from last summer was that Iran somehow would not respond, or not respond in a big way. And I think the lesson of Venezuela was that you can get away with these kinds of things. So he went into it, and also with the understanding not only about the length of time, but I don't think there was any expectations that oil prices would do what they've done. And so he has really gone into a buzzsaw of criticism, not only from the opposition in the U.S., but also from his own party. So this has been quite a learning lesson, and I think there's a great deal of concern in the Trump camp about how to get through this. That said, I think the Iranians have a tendency somehow to look at something and think they can get more out of it than they should be trying to get out of it. So, wars going back to the Peloponnesian Wars, one side feels that they're in a stronger position, continue the effort, and the other side may want to try to end it. And I think the real problem has been to get both sides simultaneously to want to end it. I think all the elements have been on the table, but no one's able to put these ingredients into a decent meal, let alone, be a chef to all this. So we'll have to see whether we've really made some progress in recent days. Time will tell.
Foad, let me get the view from Tehran, because one way of looking at it is your country has been hammered. It has a shattered economy, decapitated leadership, a regime that could be described as being under existential strain. The other way of looking at it within the region is, despite all that, it is possibly stronger and more influential.
We have also lost about 3,500 civilians, more than 200 children, about 200 hospitals, over 20 universities were attacked, bridges, other civilian infrastructure. So I agree, Iran has suffered a lot. But since Iran has suffered a lot, the Iranian leaders, I think, want to make sure that this is an end to the war. They don't want Israelis or Americans attacking Iran every few days or every few weeks. You cannot run a country of 90 million people with two nuclear regimes attacking you in this manner. And in order to do that, they need to make sure that they use all the leverage that they have. One leverage Iran has is its geography. We are going to have regime change, not in Tehran, in the Strait of Hormuz. So one of the things that I think Iranian leaders will insist is to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz is not used to attack Iran like last time. And they want to make sure that we have peace in the Middle East, which includes Lebanon. You don't want to have people in Tehran living under peace and you have a bombardment every day in southern Lebanon. That would not be correct. And it's illegal to bomb your neighbors. So there are a few things that Iranian leadership will insist. They can do another nuclear deal the same way they did in 2015. But they want to make sure that the US and Israel pay a price because they realize that unless they pay a price, they may try to do this again.
Foad, at the start of all of this, one of the big concerns from the international community in the Trump administration was Iran's nuclear program. Iran has already said it's not seeking to have a nuclear weapon. But in the end, and where things stand right now, Iran seems to have a weapon that is actually more potent in terms of the leverage it gives them than a nuclear weapon. And that is it's leveraged its own geography and the Strait of Hormuz, which is a natural choke point, and it's used it to choke the global economy. Are people in the GCC and in Kuwait surprised at this outcome?
Well, they shouldn't be, because the idea of Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz has been around for at least 40 years. And the reason Iran did not do this before was because we had people in the Iranian government analyzing that Iran taking over the Strait of Hormuz may lead to war. But we already have had the war. Since Iran has paid that price, Iran is going to use its geography and other leverages that it has to make sure that we don't have another war.
This is shared geography, Abdullah, with the GCC and the Strait of Hormuz, of course, with Oman on the other side. How are people seeing the way that this has turned out in countries like Kuwait?
Well, it's disastrous. I mean, what we are witnessing has been from the get-go. This war was carried out in an irrational assumption, a falsehood. Who dragged President Trump into this unnecessary war? It's a war of choice rather than a war of necessity. Trump believed that Iran is on its knees. Iran could be toppled. The regime could be gone in the first blow when they assassinated the supreme leader and the heads of major establishments, military and political. But at the end of the day, it was a big miscalculation. And even if you read the realists among the professors in the United States, academics, and even the neocons like Robert Kagan, who's saying that the end game for the Trump administration and Trump is surrender, and we've lost, and this is the most colossal defeat for the United States. Iran reads the pressure, domestic pressure, the suffering of the American people, paying $6 per gallon, the affordability issue. All of this is adding up. And Iran is now acting as if it is dictating the terms rather than United States. And because of that, we are suffering in this region. As you said in your introduction, the whole world is facing the most severe energy crisis. Prices are going up. Our GDP growth in the GCC countries is slashed down by more than 2.5 points. And we don't see end in sight. I mean, I wish President Trump consulted with his European allies in NATO rather than lecturing them, and also consulted with the allies in the Gulf region and the GCC states. He wouldn't have carried this erroneous, disastrous war that made everybody less secured rather than more secured. Look at Trump now. I mean, the question is, what's the difference between what Trump is agreeing to? We don't know the official details yet, and with what President Obama, JCPOA, has agreed on. What's the difference? I mean, I don't see any changes. But I mean, the most disastrous issue is that Iran wouldn't have 60% uranium enriched at a percentage of 60% for 900 pounds because Iran did not abide by the terms of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and went ahead and enriched uranium from 3.67 to 20% and now 60%. So we're paying the whole world, our region, we in the Gulf, we are paying for the erroneous approach for a long-headed war, for a war of choice. And this is the end result. And President Trump's legacy will be tarnished because of this war.
Okay, I'll bring you back. I'll bring you back in, Abdullah, in a moment.
Point, if you allow
very,
me.
very quickly then.
There are no U.S. ambassadors in 4 GCC countries. And this is mind-boggling. We don't have U.S. ambassador in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. How do we deal with the Americans?
A very important point. Ambassador Christopher Hill, you know the region, you know nuclear diplomacy, having been the negotiator with North Korea. When you get involved in this sort of high-level diplomacy, one assumes you don't want to box yourself in, but President Trump left himself really with not very many palatable options, because if he'd wanted to free the Strait of Hormuz militarily, it almost certainly would involve taking islands, taking high ground on the Iranian mainland, a massive ground forces military undertaking, would it not?
You got it. I mean, I wish I could disagree with anything that the professor has just said, but I completely agree with him. It's not only a war of choice, but in a real sense, it was a war of ignorance. I mean, they went in with false assumptions about the reaction of Iran, but I think more fundamentally, they went in with rather false assumptions of where Iran was in terms of its capacity to hit the U.S. I mean, look, I'm a diplomat. I always think that diplomacy is the way to go, and sometimes it isn't, and sometimes I'm wrong. But this was a case where there should have been some serious discussions with the Iranians. The Iranians have often said, we have no interest in a nuclear bomb. There was even a fatwa to that effect from the Ayatollah. And yet they kept enriching and kept involving themselves in technologies which were entirely consistent with the idea of achieving a bomb. And that's what American security people have been concerned about for a number of years. But often people most concerned about them, whether it's Bob Kagan or someone else, have never been concerned sufficiently about the need for diplomacy to sit down face to face and say to the Iranians, we see some problems in what you're doing, and if you continue this, we're going to have some serious problems. So I feel that the comments about we don't have ambassadors anywhere, that is absolutely correct. I mean, we don't have adequate communication, and you get into these sort of bubbles where all you do is talk to people who agree with you, and that's where we've ended up. President Trump is in a really tough position now. He needs to get out of this. I only worry that the Iranians think they're going to push this further than they should. Iran has had terrible relations with their Sunni Arab neighbors. It's kind of time the Iranians tried to fix that and tried to be a better member of the international community. So let's see if some lessons can be learned from this mess, and let's see if we can go forward in a way that is helpful to all of us. But this has been a tough situation, and frankly speaking, I've been in diplomacy for 40 years. I've dealt with these Balkan wars. I've dealt with militias in Iraq. I've dealt with North Korea. I've never seen something quite as messed up as this situation.
Very telling comments, Fuad. One of the advantages that Iran has had is it's had time on its side. Would you agree with that? The clock has run out for the US, not for Iran, and not just one clock. There's a political clock in the United States, just less than 3 weeks away. They're hosting the World Cup. You've got the midterm elections coming up in 6 months, but also the economic clock, both in the US and globally, with inflation rising around the world and fears of recession.
I agree, and I would add what's going on in the U.S. Congress, in the Senate last week. Trump lost. We had 4 Republican senators voting against his war. In the House of Representatives, he was going to lose. So instead of taking a vote, the leadership in the House of Representatives took a break, a 1-week break, so they don't have to take a vote on this war. So the war is illegal under international law, and the war is illegal under U.S. law because it's violating the War Powers Act. And the public opinion in the United States is quite upset, not just at Trump, but also at Netanyahu. We have everybody, including younger Republicans, opposing this war. Only older Republicans still have supportive views about Israel. So these are important trends that Iranians at least pay attention to. But let me disagree a little bit, since everybody is agreeing with each other here, that at one time during the Obama administration, we had a US government that had serious diplomats. They reached an agreement. It was called JCPOA. And under that agreement, Iran could not enrich more than 3.65%. And you cannot find any nuclear scientist that would tell you that you can make a nuclear bomb with that level of enrichment. And Iran accepted extensive inspections. And it was Trump that left that agreement. And I'm not sure if he's going to get something even as good as what Obama got.
Well, that's
so overall,
an outcome. That would be an outcome that I think historically will get judged. Abdullah, I want to ask you about whether something has changed for good in the Gulf countries, because you could argue since the 1970s there was a deal, a grand bargain between the Gulf countries and the US. They got security protection in exchange for stable global energy. Is that whole system broken?
Of course, we have been lulled into a false sense of security, and the United States is looked upon as unreliable ally and partner that has not really lived up to the what it has been marketing for us. We have been extremely upset because of why we were attacked, and the United States did nothing, and we are paying the price of United States ignorance. And I agree with Ambassador Hill that this war shouldn't have taken place to start with. And since it has taken place, the mismanagement of this war is just colossal. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. It's unbelievable. There is no correction. I'm hoping that finally some rationality will kick in with President Trump away from warmongers and the neocons. Even the neocons have now flipped against Trump. This is unbelievable. I mean, his own party is now against him over what he's been planning, what he's been suggesting about weaponization, about the ballroom. I mean, all these issues are distraction and Epstein file. And then the other issue that's really vague: who will really hold up the bargain? How about Israel? How about Netanyahu? He is so upset, I believe, because he doesn't want to stop the war. He doesn't want any deal. No deal is good deal. I am really afraid, and we are really concerned that Netanyahu will derail this optimism that has been building up for the last couple of days. And how about Lebanon? How about Hezbollah? How about Strait of Hormuz? There are so many unknowns, so many factors that are playing. The dynamic is really very challenging, and we don't see really any light at the end of this tunnel. Hopefully, this time Trump will play it correctly, will play it right, and things will really keep moving into the right direction. But unfortunately, I mean, with Trump, every day he has something comes up. He listens to this guy, he listens to that guy, he listens to his allies. Even his allies are really now upset with what he did in Kentucky against Thomas Massey, against the establishment. Even his inside, the MAGA coalition is being fractured. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, Megyn Kelly. I mean, all these people are really against Trump now and his war. And finally, something will come up, I believe. There is a revolt, especially among the young generation. As Massey said, I lost the election, but I started a revolution.
Okay, let me bring in Ambassador Christopher Hill again. It is interesting that if you look at the timeline, the active periods of Operation Epic Fury, the military operation with a very Trumpian title, was 39 days. The period since the ceasefire is actually longer. Has this been a wasted period? Could Trump have got this deal at any time during that period? And what are the consequences for the US and global economy?
I think the problem has been, we've known in those first 39 days, frankly, we've known from day one what the issues are. we need Iran to stop messing around with nuclear weapons. We're just not going to accept it. And by the way, it's not just the U.S. The U.S. has had the courage to say this all the time, but other countries, including in the Middle East, have completely agreed with us, urged us on with Iran, but never had the courage to come out and say this. So that's one point. Iran needs to get out of this nuclear weapons business, the business that they say that they have no interest in, but they need to get out of that. Secondly, Iran needs to understand, and I think the Chinese, among others, will try to make this clear to them that they cannot take over the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, that is just something that no one is really going to accept. So I hope there'll be an understanding of that. Third issue for Iran is they have to do a little better job of getting along with their neighbors. For the U.S., I mean, I can't tell you how many times various Sunni Arab states have come to us and say, why are you not doing enough about Iran? We get a lot of this from the region. And when the chips are down, then they fall quiet and don't really say anything. So, that's a whole set of issues. On the American side, though, really, we need to step it up. If you're going to get involved in something like this, you better know what you're doing. And I agree with all the comments to the effect that we did not know what we're doing. And I think that's a huge lesson for us. I think we've created a mess not only for us, but for the global economy. And I do hope President Trump has learned a valuable lesson from this. And we'll have to see. But for right now, as we sit here today, we really need this ceasefire issue to go forward. We need to understand that in the next 30 days, we need to solve some other longer term issues. We need to kind of stay focused on the issues that will, I think, with some careful management, we can bring this sordid issue to a close and maybe try to think about how we can prevent this from happening again. And I think we have a prospect now to go forward and figure out how to deal with this and maybe create a safer world in the process.
Ambassador Christopher Hill, Foad, Izadi and Abdullah al-Shayji, thank you for joining us on Inside Story. For more on the situation, Al Jazeera has teams in Washington, D.C., Tehran, Islamabad, Beirut and here in the Gulf. And for more context and analysis, go to our website, aljazeera.com. We'd like to hear your views. The place for that is our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or on X, tag us. We are at AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, James Bays, and the team here. But stay tuned. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in just a moment.